welcome to our Play Well podcast series. My name is Marguerite Hunter-Blair and I am Chief Executive of Play Scotland, the national organisation for play. Today we will look at how play can be used to support active travel and lead to better outcomes for all children. To explore this, we will be hearing from Naomi Wright. As a member of the Art and Energy Collective, Naomi makes visual or performative and playful work that is about nature, energy and climate change. She likes collaborating with other members of the collective and working with partners to make a positive difference. We will also be talking to Robyn Warburton. Robyn is a development officer for Paths for All's Smarter Choices, Smarter Places, which aims to increase active and sustainable travel throughout Scotland. The programme is grant funded by Transport Scotland. Robyn has worked in the sustainable travel sector for 5 years, and she is keen to help raise awareness of the many benefits of active and sustainable travel. To talk about bicycles and active travel, we will be joined by Emily Ryder from Play Together on Pedals. Emily is a programme manager at Cycling UK. She manages several projects running across Scotland, including the Play Together on Pedals project, which supports and enables young children and their families to experience the fun and freedom of cycling. First, our Learning and Development Officer, Jenny Lester, caught up with Naomi Wright from the Art and Energy Collective.
Hi Naomi, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast today. It'd be great if you could just start by introducing yourself and telling me what play means to you.
Okay, so I'm Naomi Wright and I work with the Art and Energy Collective. I'm an artist, but funnily enough, I also call myself a scientist. I embrace both and I don't like designations and boundaries very much, which is where play fits in, because for me, play is a sort of freedom to express creatively across boundaries and to not necessarily worry about the outcome. So at whatever age, it's an exploratory, experiential thing, and that's what gets me going, I think.
And Art and Energy, you've been doing a project called Moths to a Flame. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, Art and Energy is a collection of makers and scientists and tinkerers and artists and energy specialists and people who like living sustainably or like exploring how to live sustainably. And we're all working together to create projects which face the climate emergency, that encourage people to think differently about the future and the future of the planet in particular. And so Moths to a Flame grew out of that for a number of different reasons. But Moths to a Flame is a project that's creating 20,000 moths made out of recycled plastic milk bottles to be hung and displayed in a big installation at the Glasgow Botanics during COP26. And it's also a project where we're collecting the voices of people, people's call for action or people's hopes for the future from across the United Kingdom. And that will be an audio installation as part of Moths to a Flame. So Moths to a Flame itself, where did it come from? Well, it came from one of my colleagues noticing a moth bashing itself against the window, trying to reach a light in a bathroom. And it sort of made her think about the whole metaphor of Moths to a Flame, how we as humans behave that way. We're attracted to light, we're attracted to energy, we're attracted to twinkly, sparkly things. And we sort of know that some of all of that is destructive as well. And so the Moths to a Flame is all about that metaphor. And it can be taken also to mean about our relationship with energy, where that energy comes from, through the sun, through nature, and all that entails.
And in this project, in what ways do you utilise play, and what do you think the benefits of using play are?
Oh, we do it in so many different ways. Using play, we often gather people. It's a collaborative, cooperative sort of project where the collective's involved, but all sorts of people become involved. And we gather them together to offer an array of, I'll call it loose parts, because there's an article written years and years ago about how play is enhanced by a range of loose materials. Anyway, we offer a whole range of loose parts and invite people to design or develop or make using their imagination. So that's very playful and creative. The design of the project itself, we get together, we go for a walk, we arrange things in different orders, we discuss things. The conversation is very drifting, if you like. So it's an open-ended process. So the whole project is designed playfully. And then play as a sort of human right, as a thing which we've evolved with. In the formation of the installation itself, if we've included as many people as we can from all sorts of places, working in all sorts of fields and, wide range of ages and origins and so on, we've allowed as many people as possible to take their own initiative and have that sort of space to express themselves in a playful, imaginative way, to take part in the whole.
Great. So I think it's really exciting that we're using play and creativity to get children engaged with the COP26 conference, but also just with ideas of the future, and that they can have an impact on the world in that way. And through creativity and through play, they can have that impact. What sort of effect does the programme have on children who take part in these sort of workshops that you're running?
Oh, all sorts, because we're trying to open up their future world with their imagination, but at the same time, sort of from a standing point of understanding a bit more about nature and real life. So that starting point of seeing and noticing and observing real moths that have magically appeared during the night really inspires and opens up that sort of, that bit of the brain that allows the future to be thought about in a different way. So that's how we start. I mean, if we haven't found some real moths, then there's pictures and there's discussions about how creatures live in a place and the moths live in a place. But then from that acknowledgement of the variety and diversity of life, and in this case moths, it leads to such an array of making and messaging and ideas which wouldn't have happened otherwise.
Definitely. I definitely find when we're doing the workshops with the children, they are just so amazed by the moths and just that they're alive and flying. And I really didn't expect them to be so excited by engaging with the natural world in that way. They've probably seen butterflies, maybe they might have seen a moth before, but the amount of moths there are, and then that they can, put them in the little tube and have a look at them and try and work out what kind of moth they are. And it's really fantastic, I think. Yeah,
and also that the moths come out of places where, in a great biodiverse area with shrubs and trees and ton of plants and flowers, lots of food plants for the caterpillar stage, and obviously in a place like that, you're going to get a wide variety. But if you're by a hedge in a playground, by an estate that's not particularly biodiverse or special in that way, you still get some moths. And
Exactly.
then that understanding that even in a place that's a little bit arid on the plant front, you still got creatures that we all rely on and are taking part in that ecosystem. It's a really lovely thing to notice and start that conversation about life and where the energy comes from and what eats what and where it might go, you know?
Exactly. The first workshop that I ran was actually in like a concrete playground, and I was really like, are we going to catch any? And there was like 30 of them, and I couldn't believe it. And the kids were so excited because, you know, there isn't a huge amount of like nature in their playground, but then they found that there was, you know, we were all quite surprised by that.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting the way that you can use these conversations about life and biodiversity and energy to talk about the environment in more general terms. For example, active travel and sustainability. How do you see this project relating to those themes?
That understanding of the flow of energy, and then combined with understanding of where different forms of energy come from. So it leads to conversations about the fossil fuels and the sun and all the other elemental forms of energy, and then what the fossil fuels might be doing to our world and the carbon dioxide levels and how that is helping to warm up the earth. So all those things lead to some discussions about alternative ways of getting about places. So whether it's the walking or whether it's riding a bicycle or whatever it is, it leads to, so you don't have to use fossil fuels every single time, and you can travel about without having such a detrimental impact on the earth or on your place. So it does lead to conversations about active travel. The project itself, which a lot of which is held outdoors, is also about being more comfy outside, and that the rain doesn't dissolve our skin, and that we can dip in and out of activities and run around and use that playful activity as a way of learning and moving differently. So I think all these projects that relate to nature and energy and outdoors all start to get people thinking slightly differently about how they use all those things themselves in the long term.
And if people are thinking about that and maybe thinking, oh, that sounds really interesting, I'd like to get involved, where would you direct them to?
I mean, obviously, I'd direct them to our website, which is mothstoaflame.art, and that leads to a whole range of activities within there. And in the longer term beyond COP26, we'll be taking moths to different places. So the metaphor and the special nature of moths in the energy flows around us will remain. But in the longer term, there's also our Art and Energy website, which is artandenergy.org. But, you know, there's both places people can go. And I could also say that they could come to the Botanic Gardens in Glasgow during the first 2 weeks in November to see the installation of 20,000 moths, and hundreds of people reading poetry or speaking or just having a little desire about their future as well. Another way of getting involved in Moths to a Flame is to come along to some of our online events. And one of them is called Watch Moths, which we think is even better than Spring Watch. But anyway, Watch Moths has moths. It has energy specialists and sustainable communities sharing their good practice, as it were. And it also has artists sharing what they do. But the Moths are always the stars. So if you want to come along and find out more, watch that.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. This has been really interesting and really lovely to chat to you.
That's right. It's been my pleasure. I'm looking forward to working with Play Scotland a bit more in the future.
Now Jenny is talking to Emily Ryder from Play Together on Pedals.
Hi, Emily. It's nice to have you on our podcast. I was really interested to invite you along. Could you introduce yourself for our audience and say a little bit about what play means to you?
Yes, of course. It's nice to be here. Thanks for having me. My name is Emily Ryder. I work for Cycling UK and I manage a programme called Play Together on Pedals. It's one of our programmes here in Scotland. It is an early years and family cycling programme.
Fantastic. And can you tell us a bit about the programme itself? Like, when did it start and anything interesting you'd like to share with us about it?
Of course, yeah. So it started in 2016 as Play on Pedals and kind of evolved over that time so it started as a nursery programme, a programme in earlier settings, and now the Play Together aspect is we're aiming to get families involved in cycling as well. So we support and encourage families to experience the fun and freedom of riding their bikes together. And we do that by teaching young children, so under 5, to ride balance bikes at first, and then to get going on pedals as well. And in the process, encouraging their parents and carers and other family members to join in and have fun together.
It seems like play is an integral part of this work. Do you think you could tell me a little bit about the benefits of using play in this way?
Fundamentally, at Cycling UK, with all of our projects, we want to normalise cycling. We want to make it inclusive and accessible, and we want to show that it can be for everyone. And so this programme, Play Together on Pedals, uses bikes as another tool for play. So we don't associate bikes with sport or transport. They're just fun things that you can play with. And so the idea is that using bikes in this playful, enjoyable way makes it easier for children to see bikes as something fun. And hopefully that helps to shake up the mindset that some adults have, that cycling can be a bit dangerous or sort of other. We're trying to, I think particularly in the current climate crisis, it's really important that we think about active travel, think about the car not being the default, that you have other options which are better for the planet, better for you. I think play just really helps to embed that idea of cycling as a fun thing into the kids' brains, at least, and hopefully they're adults as well.
Well, that leads me really nicely on to my next question about the effect of the programme and what effect the programme has on children who take part, but also their families. So
we've been really surprised by the sort of wide range of ways that children have benefited from taking part in Play Together on Pedals. And I think, we've been doing it for, as I say, since 2016, so we've got quite a good bank of evidence now. There's the obvious physical and mental well-being benefits that children gain and their families from being outside, from riding bikes. But we've also found there's been lots of unexpected benefits too. So, for example, it's a really inclusive programme. So in any group of children, you might have someone who doesn't speak English as their first language, or someone who's autistic, or someone who's very, very shy, doesn't normally get involved in group activities. And we found that all of these children take part in and enjoy Play Together on Pedals because you can ride, everyone's it's a bit of a level playing field. If you're on a balance bike, the vast majority of children can join in with that. So it helps with that group dynamic, and it also helps them to develop fine motor skills. They're learning about using brakes. We teach them about all the different parts of a bicycle. So they're doing that kind of STEM side of things. They're learning how, it's physics, isn't it? And maths. And so they're doing all of that stuff, and their confidence builds as well. So there's all of that for the children. But then in terms of the family side of things, it's just really lovely. It's a really lovely thing for families to do together, to ride their bikes together. You can see children are much more stimulated on a bike ride, even if they're not pedaling themselves, even if they're on in a seat or on a cargo bike. They can smell things and they can hear things much more than they could if they were just in a car. So that's the sort of mindset that we're aiming to get these families into, that you can, even if you're just going to the shops, or you're just going to nursery, or even just a jaunt to the park, you can do it on a bike, and you'll all get lots more out of it than if you were just to get in the car or the bus.
So that sounds like this sort of work is doing a great job at supporting active travel. Could you maybe talk a little bit more about that?
I mean, we certainly do try to support active travel. It's we know that lots of parents and carers are really unsure about their small children riding bikes for all the obvious reasons. If there's not adequate infrastructure where they live, it seems quite risky. We hope to help families to build confidence by teaching their children to ride confidently so that they're better equipped for riding out and about. But on top of that, we can also offer advice about things like cycle network. If you're not already riding a bike as an adult, you might not know what cycle paths there are, where they go, how close they are to your house, actually how convenient it might be. And we can also give support and advice on things like family cycling equipment. So lots of, you might not be sure about a kid's seat, for example, on your bike. So we can lend people these pieces of equipment so they can have a go before they go out and buy one for themselves. And then kind of more broadly, I suppose, in terms of supporting active travel, there's the pester power element. If we can get the kids really enthusiastic about cycling, then that obviously will lead, hopefully, to the adults that they live with also wanting to join in too. It's much easier to ride a bike next to a 5-year-old on a pedal bike than it is to try and run alongside them for most people. But ultimately, by normalising bikes for these children, we're hoping to create a new generation who just see cycling as another way to get around, which is enjoyable and good for the planet and quick and easy and not just jumping in the car as an automatic choice.
Fantastic. So you've already touched on some of the barriers that children and families might face when getting into cycling in terms of infrastructure. But I was wondering if your programme itself has faced any sort of barriers and how you overcame them.
It's really dull, but funding is probably the one that we come back to again and again. So at the moment, Play Together and Pedals programme runs in Glasgow. So we have run it in Edinburgh and East Lothian and the borders. But yeah, the funding for that has ended, and it's kind of a constant because it's just a difficult one to fund. We see the benefit, obviously, but it's quite tricky to see where it fits between active travel funding or early years funding or education, or it's sort of. But we work in partnership with Play Scotland and Cycling Scotland, and the nursery programme, which is called Play on Pedals. It does run across the country, and they've got slightly different funding, but regardless, there could always be more. Like there's always nurseries asking for support with buying bikes or trying to get storage for the bikes that they have, that kind of thing. It's never ending, but all we can do, I suppose, is signpost them to funding streams and keep doing what we can with the funding that we have. And we work in Glasgow in a sort of partnership network of other organisations who we can borrow bikes from as well, and nurseries can borrow bikes from them. So there's workarounds without needing to necessarily buy fleets of bikes for every single nursery, although we would love to do that.
And again, you've almost answered my next question already, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I was wondering if parents or carers or early years practitioners are wanting to get involved with your project, how would you suggest they went about that?
Obviously, we've had to scale back everything that we have been doing in the last couple of years because of COVID. So previously we were running, and I suppose we aim to get back to running drop-in sessions across Glasgow, which are free to attend. We used to have kind of 30 to 40 families at each one, and it was chaotic, but it was really good fun. And at the moment, we aren't running those big sessions, but we do have bookable sessions that people can attend in a couple of different venues in Glasgow. We're aiming to increase the venues that we're working in as well. So if parents are interested, they can book onto those. Unfortunately, it's just in Glasgow at the moment. Again, as I say, if we had the funding, we'd be doing it in every single part of Scotland, but just Glasgow just now. And then in terms of early years settings, again, because of COVID, we've had to really scale back what we were doing. It's always been very difficult to get early years practitioners to have the time to come and do training with us. And now obviously earlier settings, it's quite difficult to get external people in. But it is happening, and that does happen across Scotland. So in terms of early years practitioners, it would just be a case of getting in touch with Cycling Scotland. Training in nurseries, earlier settings, it is happening, but on a smaller scale, and it'll depend on each local authority as well, what they want to do and what they're allowing, I suppose, in terms of education settings.
That's great, yeah. So we'll pop in the description our email address, which is info@playscotland.org, and if anyone does want to get in touch to get involved with this project, you can email us and we will pass on the details. But thank you so much for joining us. Do you have anything else you want to add, a little shout out about the project that you'd like to include as a last message?
I manage a whole sort of suite of projects in Scotland, and this is definitely one of my favourites. Not supposed to have favourites, but this one, it just the benefits are so great. They're so wide ranging, and I think as much as those big sessions that we used to run were great fun, I think actually there's lots that we can do going forward in a smaller scale. It's much more of a kind of bespoke service, I suppose, if you've got a smaller number of children. So I'm glad that we're still able to offer something and that lots of people are still able to benefit from this. And I hope going forward that we can just get more and more kids on bikes and they'll go on to change the world. That's the plan.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now let's hear from Sherry Morgan, our Director of Projects at Play Scotland, who caught up with Robyn Warburton from Paths for All.
Hello Robyn, nice to meet you. Can you please introduce yourself and say a bit about what play means to you?
Hi, many thanks for inviting me to talk on the podcast today. So my name is Robyn Warburton. I've worked with Paths for All for the last 3 years now. Prior to this, I worked as a cycling officer for Sustrans, delivering their iBike programme to schools in Perth and Kinross. And this was again to encourage more children to travel actively to school. So I've been involved in the active travel sector now for around 5 years, and I've spent a couple of these years working with school children as part of this. I think to me, play is an essential part of development for children, and it's providing them with the opportunities to explore, to learn, and to be creative in fun and engaging ways. And I think it's important to kind of allow them the freedom to interpret this on their own, and in turn to help them navigate and understand the world around them.
So you've spoken a bit about where play is important for children. So how does that fit into the work that Paths for All do in Scotland?
Obviously, Paths for All is the national walking charity, and our vision is that everyone has the opportunity to be active every day, creating a happier, healthier and greener Scotland. And for most, walking and wheeling is the easiest and most accessible way to do this. So within my role in Paths for All, I work specifically with the Smarter Choices, Smarter Places programme. So this is a behaviour change programme which encourages people to travel actively and sustainably by walking, wheeling, cycling and using public transport. And it's grant funded by Transport Scotland with 5 million being allocated to 32 local authorities annually and a further 2.5 million through the Open Fund for community, public and third sector organisations. So within my role, I work really closely with these organisations through the Open Fund who are delivering projects that encourage people to change their everyday travel behaviours. So as part of this, we receive applications from organisations that are looking to deliver projects targeted at children and young people. And obviously their main aim here is to encourage the children to travel more actively, be that to school, to after school clubs, to different sports clubs and facilities, and really trying to get parents and carers involved in that behaviour change element of the project as well.
At Play Scotland, we hear a lot about how parents are nervous about children going out, children travelling actively, about they're worried about traffic dangers. How does the work you do overcome those fears and allow children and young people to go out more?
Yeah, certainly. I think it is a big concern, especially with the amount of traffic we see on our roads these days, particularly in smaller communities and cities as well. So our funding, it is revenue funding. So a lot of these projects deliver work that addresses local needs. So whether that be concerns over safety, they'll deliver maybe road safety campaigns. They'll look at funding from other active travel delivery partners for improving infrastructure, so they have safer cycle and walking routes and designated paths to access facilities in their area. There's a lot of work we do, and I think we funded quite a lot of organisations now. A couple in particular, to give examples, is Glenboy Development Trust and Getting Better Together, both of which are based in North Lanarkshire, but they've been delivering school walking buses. So essentially they collect children at designated stops en route to school, so they then walk together as a group. And that obviously reduces the need for parents to drive their children to school, preventing congestion and concerns around road safety at the school gates as well. So I think there's a multitude of things that can be done through this funding to address those kind of local barriers people may face with travelling actively in a safe manner.
We've heard there how children are obviously direct recipients and they benefit from the work you're doing. Do you have ways that you involve children and young people in the planning of the work that you do?
I think a lot of the organisations we work with, because obviously we fund them directly to deliver projects, they spend a lot of the time consulting with local communities. So parents and children themselves, they do get involved a lot with the projects to see what's needed within that area, what they would like to see on the ground to kind of implement and address those changes. And then the projects will work really closely with those groups throughout the course of its life cycle to kind of implement those change and help support more healthy and sustainable behaviour change in travel.
What sort of barriers has your programme faced in Scotland? What sorts of things make it difficult for you to do your work?
I think because obviously the main aim of our programme is supporting behaviour change, and it is a long process until we see people actually physically changing their behaviours. I think that comes back with our current funding structure, which means projects only have 12 months to deliver their activity. And we know that behaviour change often takes a lot longer than this. So it would be great to be able to offer multi-year funding projects so that they can really understand the needs of their communities and work with them closely for a number of years to kind of embed these changes and make them more sustainable. And I think particularly as well, we need to reach new audiences. There is a limited network of active travel agencies, so targeting new audiences will allow Smarter Choices, Smarter Places to reach a wider, deeper and more diverse audience as well.
So how can parents, carers, families, practitioners, how can they get involved in Paths for All or some of Paths for All's projects?
Yes, certainly. Obviously, we can fund schools, community groups, basically any constituted group. For example, parent councils that are looking to encourage an increase in sustainable travel, they're all welcome to apply for funding. We do have a list of examples on our website. If people maybe need some ideas or inspiration, there's some case studies along there as well, along with all our guidance and criteria. But we do really encourage people to, just to get in touch with us first if they want to chat through a few ideas to see what would be possible or what would be feasible through the fund. In terms of our wider Paths for All work that's been happening recently, including children and active travel, we also have our Autumn Path Days. So for the past year, our active environments team have been running seasonal Path Days campaigns that run around school holiday time. So these start on the 1st of October and they run for the whole month. So parents can visit our website and they can get lots of ideas and information about how to keep their kids active, healthy and outdoors this autumn. And we'll also have some top tips about how families can incorporate active travel into their daily routines. Similarly, we still have a lot of resources that we made during lockdown. So we set up an online information hub to help families stay active and keep kind of kids entertained as well. So that information hub is still on our website. So it's very worthwhile going on there to have a look to see what resources are there.
That sounds great. Sounds like there's a great deal of resources there for families who want to get involved, to get more active. I'm delighted that you haven't said that bad weather is a reason for not choosing active travel. Is that something that you find in Scotland, obviously with the dark nights approaching and the worse weather coming? Do you think we will be able to continue to get, children and young people being active and using active travel options?
Yeah, obviously the weather does crop up occasionally, and we obviously do notice in the winter months we lose that daylight a lot more quickly. So again, I think it is still really important to include them, and a lot of our projects still support children in active travel through these months. And it's through various campaigns like Be Bright, Be Seen, that teaches them all about road safety and the importance of visibility as well. So I think it's still really important because people still need to get about during the winter time as well. So giving them the skills and knowledge on how to do this safely and actively is the best way to do that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time today. That's been really interesting for me to find out more. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about Paths for All?
If anybody's really interested in finding out more about our work, our website's a really rich and useful source of resource and articles. And I think any member of Paths for All team, we're really keen to speak to people to see how we can help support your projects and your work. So please do get in touch and we can see what we can do to support you.
Thank you for joining us on this podcast. Next time, we will be looking at play, poverty and social justice. Look out for our next episode on the usual podcast apps and on our Actify module. Join the conversation by following us on Twitter and using the hashtag PlayWellPodcast. And to find out more about Play Scotland, visit our website playscotland.org and follow us on Twitter @PlayScotland. Thanks for listening.